Well, I'm glad you're here today. I'm glad you're sitting up straight and paying attention, because today we're going to hear chapter 3 of Jean-Luc and the Big Whopper. Captain Kergula had promised 5 golden coins to the first sailor who would see the new land. Everyone was wondering, will it be me? And what will I do with 5 golden coins? I'll buy some ice cream, that's the first coin. I'll buy a new bicycle, that's the second coin. And Jean-Luc had lots of ideas for his money, and he hadn't even seen the land yet. Well, there he was, sitting inside and wondering, should I wash the dishes or look out the window for the new land? Well, Pierre helped him to know what to do, and he washed all of the dishes, all 100 of them. And finally, after all his chores were done, Jean-Luc went outside, and Captain Kergula said, "Jean-Luc, my boy, come up to the helm and help me steer the ship." And as you remember, Jean-Luc began to steer the ship this way and that and round in circles. "Jean-Luc, please go straight." And they had such a good time, and all of a sudden, they heard a sailor from way up at the top of the mainmast yell, "Land ho!" And everyone looked, and there, on the horizon, they could see. Do you see it right there? Way out there, you could hardly see it. There was a little bit of land sticking up, and as they came closer to it, they found out that it was a small island. It wasn't the new land. But they were close. They knew it was close. The wind was blowing very strong. And the masts, they were filled with air. And the ship was blowing along very nicely, getting closer and closer to find the land that Captain Kergula had found the year before. Do you think they'll ever find it? It seems like it's taking forever and ever, but while they're waiting, Jean-Luc thought, you know what? Captain Kergula is such a nice man. Why, he lets me steer the ship sometimes, and he asks me questions about my mom and dad, and we have such a nice time together. He's so nice. Why, I wonder if he is a Christian. And so Jean-Luc is thinking, maybe I will ask him. And so he prayed, Lord, help me to know what to say. And then he looked up at Captain Kergula and he said, "Captain Kergula?" "Yes, Jean-Luc?" "I have a question to ask you if you don't mind." "Well, what is it?" "Well, you've been very kind to me, very nice, and, I was just wondering if, you're so nice and all. You're always so kind to me. You let me steer the ship. You ask questions about my family, and you pat me on the head. And, I just love being patted on the head, don't you?" And he said, "I was just wondering if the reason you're so nice is because you're a Christian." Well, Captain Kergula kind of turned his head away, and he said, "Well, when I was a baby, my mom and dad had me baptized at the church. And..." "You were baptized as a baby?" "Oh, yeah. So that means I must be a Christian, right, Jean-Luc?" "Well, I didn't ask you if you were baptized. What I meant was, have you ever been born again by believing on Jesus?" "Jean-Luc, I'm ashamed of you asking questions like that. Why, look how tall I am, and dignified. Why, I have gone to church at least 3 times in my whole life. One time I even read a whole chapter in the Bible. Of course, I am a Christian." Jean-Luc looked at Captain Kergula and he thought, I don't think he understands what I meant. And he was about to ask him, "Captain Kergula, don't you understand what it means to be born again and be saved and all that?" But before Jean-Luc could say anything more, they heard from way up in the crow's nest on the top of the main mast, the sailor yelled again. But this time he didn't say, "Land ho!" He said, "I see a sail on the horizon." And sure enough, Captain Kergula pulled out his telescope and looked very far away, and there was a boat, a big ship with a sail on it, and it seemed to be coming closer to them. What was it? When you're out there all alone on the ocean and another ship comes toward you, you really don't know if it's a good ship or a pirate ship. Arrgh! Pirate ships could go all over the ocean looking for ships to get. And come and with their swords take your ship away from you and put you in a small boat and leave you all alone in the ocean. And Jean-Luc thought, I sure hope it isn't a pirate ship. And Captain Kergula was thinking, I sure hope it's not a pirate ship too. And all of the sailors, you know what they were thinking? Let's turn around and go home. But Captain Kergula picked up his telescope, and an hour later he looked and he said, wait a minute, I can see a flag on top of the mainmast of that ship. It's the French flag. Hey, that's the same country that Jean-Luc was from. And so, very slowly, the ships came closer and closer, and he looked through his telescope again, and he could see the name on the side of the ship. Have you ever seen the name of a ship on the side of it? And someone has very carefully written it with paint, and it was the Le Sceau, one of the ships that was hunting for the land of Captain Kergula. Oh, they were so happy. It was some of their friends. And so, finally, the boats came very close. The ships came closer together. But as Captain Kergula and Jean-Luc looked across from their ship over to the other ship, they looked at the faces of the sailors. And you know what, boys and girls? The faces of the sailors were not very happy. They had frowns on their faces. And Captain Kergula looked over and he said, Men, what seems to be the problem on the Le Sceau? And they shouted back, Our cook is sick, and he's not making food. What were they going to do? Captain Kergula said, well, they need a good cook. They need someone who can fix the food for them. Why, I wonder, Jean-Luc, do you know who would be a good person to go over there who knows how to cook and has some experience in that? And Jean-Luc said, well, Pierre does, and I help him. Captain Kergula snapped his fingers and said, Jean-Luc, how would you like to be the new head cook on the Le Sceau? Me? Well, I'm just a boy, Captain Kergula. No, Jean-Luc, I think you would be the perfect one for the job. You see, Captain Kergula didn't want Jean-Luc to tell him about Jesus anymore. He didn't want to tell him that he was a sinner that needed to be saved and born again. And he said, the quickest way to get Jean-Luc away from me is to send him on to the other ship. Jean-Luc, I really want you to go over there. Well, Jean-Luc thought, well, that would be a great opportunity for me. So Jean-Luc went back to the kitchen and said, Pierre, guess what? I'm going to be the new head cook on the Le Sceau. And Pierre said, oh, well, who's going to help me now? I don't know. But it's been good knowing you. And he shook his hand and went back to his bunk and got the bags that had his clothes in it and went over to Captain Kergula and said, I'm ready to go. And they put him in the boat, the little boat, and lowered it down. Squeak, 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 and down went the boat on the ropes into the water. You remember that the wind is still blowing very strongly. It is blowing the boat back and forth, and Jean-Luc is not yet in the water, and he's going back and forth against the side of the boat, and finally, splash! He and the sailors that were going to row him across the sea to the other ship were ready, and they began to row the boat, and finally they came to the side of Le Sceau. And they looked up, and there, over the side of the boat, came some ropes. Ooh! And they tied the ropes to the front of the boat and the back of the boat, and they watched as the sad-faced sailors wound up the ropes and drew the boat up to the top. And Jean-Luc got out of the little boat and onto the deck of the Le Sceau. All of the men looked at Jean-Luc. Most of them were older men. Some of them were 50 years old, some of them 30 years old. And there was one young boy who was about 15, about close to the age of Jean-Luc. And they all looked at him and they said, "Are you the new cook? You were just a boy. How can you cook food?" And Jean-Luc said, "You come to the kitchen and you'll find out." And Jean-Luc went to the kitchen and he made the best biscuits you could ever have and put jam and jelly and peanut butter and mixed it all together. And they were the best biscuits. And after he was done feeding them, do you know what the people said? "Wow, you know how to cook. Those were the best biscuits I have ever had." Well, looks like the people are going to be smiling on that boat. Well, as the days went by, Jean-Luc began cooking and making wonderful meals like chicken and turkey, and he would make steak and hamburgers and French fries. Well, he was from France, right? French fries, and he would put ketchup on it, and the people loved it. But then, after a while, the two boats separated, and Captain Kergula waved goodbye, and he went off, and pretty soon they couldn't see his ship anymore, and the ship that Jean-Luc was on, the Luceau, began to sail around looking for that new land that Captain Kergula had found. Do you think they'll ever find it? Jean-Luc was in the kitchen working up a batch of soup one day, stirring it around, when he heard some people yelling up on the deck, and he wondered, "What's wrong? Is someone hurt?" And he dropped the spoon he was stirring with and thought, "Oh, I shouldn't have done that." But he ran out of the kitchen, ran out onto the deck, and he saw all of the men gathered around at the front of the boat, and he said, "What's the matter? Is somebody..." And then he looked. There, ahead of the ship, right after he said those words, he saw what all of the people were staring at. There in front of the ship, would you believe, was the new land. The land that Captain Kergula had found the year before. And all the people were talking, "Oh, I'm so excited. I hope I get to go on shore. I want to go explore it." And Jean-Luc was just as excited as everybody else. And the captain of the Luceau said, "Men, listen, listen." All the people were quiet. And they looked at the captain and he said, "To be fair, we are going to send only 12 people on to the new land in our boat. But to be fair, we will put all of your names in a jar, and we will draw out the slips of paper. And if your name is on that slip of paper, the first one, the second one, all the way through the 12th one, you will be the one to go." Oh, Jean-Luc was so excited. He forgot all about the soup that was now boiling over on the stove. Uh-oh. Jean-Luc was waiting. He wrote his name on a piece of paper and put it into the jar, and so did all of the other sailors. And most of them were wiggling their fingers. They were so excited, and their toes. And some of them were, bending their knees and wondering, "What can we do? Oh. Hey, you can't put your name in twice." One of the sailors was trying to put his name in twice. Oh, take that name out. All of the men lined up around the sides of the ship, and the captain took the jar, and he began to draw names out. The first one, Jacques. Jacques was able to go, and he stood by the little boat that would go and row into the shore. He called the second name, and the third name, and the fourth name, and it wasn't Jean-Luc's name yet. And the fifth name, the sixth name, the seventh, eighth, ninth, 10th, 11th. Jean-Luc hung his head down. "I don't think I'll be able to go on to the new land." Captain said, "Men, as you know, there is one name left." And he reached his hand into the jar, pulled out a slip of paper. He looked at the men and he said, "Jean-Luc." Yay! He was so excited. Oh, he just jumped up and down, jumped up and down. Oh, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have acted that way. Yay! And he was so happy. And he went over to the boat and, I guess I better pack some food. You better. And they made a big lunchbox and put it inside of the rowboat. And pretty soon, Jean-Luc and the other 11 men were on their way over to the new land. As they rowed in the boat, Jean-Luc looked ahead and he saw, hey, looks like some people walking on the island. Looks like 100, maybe 1,000 people. And all of them were wearing white and black. And he looked, and as he got closer, he noticed that it wasn't people, it was penguins. There were hundreds and thousands of penguins walking along the shore and pecking at each other and making noises and swimming in the water. And finally they pulled up and they looked at the penguins and they thought, these are some funny penguins. You know, one of the penguins had yellow hair sticking up off the top of its head. Why, what funny creatures these are. And as they walked around, they saw some elephant seals. If you've never seen an elephant seal is very big. It is 10 times as heavy as Pastor Rupert. That's heavy. And as they looked at the elephant seals, they didn't get too close. They didn't want to get sat on by a seal. Well, finally the leader of the group said, "Men, I believe we ought to divide up into 6 different groups of 2 men, and we'll go around the island and try to discover how big it is and what it's like, and if there are other animals, and if we could build houses here, and then we will tell Captain Kergula when we get back to France." Well, as Jean-Luc looked around, there was a boy about his age. It was the 15-year-old, and his name was Jacques. And Jacques and Jean-Luc began to walk around and look at things, and, you know, they looked off there, and there in the distance they could see a very big mountain. At the top of the mountain there was snow on it. And as they walked around they saw rocks, and at one place there was a big, tall arch of a rock. It looked like a big donut standing up on top of rocks. And he said, "Wow, that is neat." It was over 300 feet tall. As they walked around, Jean-Luc said, "You know what? This is a very neat place. I'm glad that I got to be on here. God sure was good to me." And at that, Jacques looked at him and said, "You know what? Jean-Luc, you sure are different." Jean-Luc said, "What do you mean I am different? Why do you think I am different?" He says, "Well, you know, the other day when all of the men were cursing and swearing, you didn't say any swear words. You sure are different. And you know, when you spilled the soup the other day and it burned your hand, you didn't curse and swear, and you didn't slap anybody or be mean. Why are you so different?" Jean-Luc smiled and he said, "You know why I am different? It's because I'm saved. I have become a Christian. You know," he said, "one day a long time ago, when I was a young boy, I realized that I was a sinner and that I couldn't save myself at all. I was on my way to hell without Jesus, but then one day, some preacher told me all about Jesus, how he died for my sins and rose again. And you know what, Jacques? What? I believed. And God forgave me of my sins, and He's made me a new person." Oh, well, I've never done that. Let's walk around a little bit more. Jean-Luc and Jacques began to walk around. They said, "Hey, look at that field over there. It's got some flowers and some grass. It's even got cabbages growing over there. Let's walk over there." And they walked along, and as they were going, Jacques bent down to pick up a flower. He was going to bring it back and give it to the captain. That would be a nice thing to do. And he bent down, and all of a sudden he heard Jean-Luc say, "Help!" He turned around, and Jean-Luc was nowhere to be found. Where is Jean-Luc? The only way we're going to find out is if you come back next time.